Thank you, Madam Chair. And I thank the distinguished delegates for all your interventions. I'll try to answer all the questions, starting with responding to the Islamic Republic of Iran and on sanctions and on women's rights, on the death penalty and the transnational repression, and a couple of other questions if I have time. So first, I'd like to address the comments from the delegates of the Islamic Republic of Iran. On the point about not recognizing the legitimacy of my mandate, I want to start by acknowledging that it would be difficult for any country to welcome a country mandate with open arms. Therefore, I appreciate the engagement of the Islamic Republic of Iran to date. Going forward, my goal is to build on this existing relationship and engagement and foster further constructive dialogue on substantive issues, and for me to be able to provide practical recommendations for further improvement. In more concrete terms, I think my knowledge and expertise on the death penalty could be an asset to the Islamic Republic of Iran if it were serious about restricting the application of death penalty leading to eventual abolition. On country visit, I reiterate my request for the government to grant unhindered access to the country. A positive response will be a significant indicator for the government's willingness to cooperate substantively with this mandate. I also thank the Islamic Republic of Iran for their appreciation for my independence and objectivity. On the criticism concerning the insufficient research and the use of unreliable data, I wish to make several points. Transparency is one of the key themes of my mandate. It is what I asked for of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and I apply the same standard to myself. This is why I have a public call for input for all my reports, and I make my sources clear all in my footnotes. Here, I commend civil society organizations for their meticulous data collection and families for providing testimonies despite the significant risks. I agree with the Islamic Republic of Iran that thorough research and use of reliable data is vital, and I would like to remind the Islamic Republic of Iran that I have requested information to inform my reports. If I have only quoted civil society data, it means I did not receive the information that I had requested. Opacity also makes it impossible for states to demonstrate non-discrimination and equal treatment under the law, as there is no way to show human rights is properly upheld in the country. I look forward to receiving further information, data on this topic, and I look forward to our constructive engagement. Now on the impact of sanctions, in my report, I have a recommendation which calls states imposing sanctions to implement effective humanitarian exemptions to minimize human rights impact. Sanctions have indeed affected Iran's economy, but they do not themselves absolve the states from responsibility to protect fundamental rights and freedoms. For example, the restrictions on freedom of expression, assembly of association, and targeting of civil society organization or inadequate protection of minority rights, they reflect domestic policy decisions independent of international restrictions. These violations create a cycle where human rights abuses lead to international isolation, reduced investment, and internal instability, all of which harm economic development. Moreover, the extensive enforcement apparatus required to maintain a tight grip on its people diverts significant state resources away from productive economic activities. I also want to finalize my point on sanctions by saying that the full scope of sanctions, the impact, also remains difficult to access without transparent data on resource allocation decisions and government practices. This makes it very challenging to distinguish the impact of sanctions from other domestic factors affecting human rights. Now I wish to say a few words on the rights of women, and thank you for the delegations for raising the issue of women's rights, as this is also one of the key priorities of my mandate. In my report to the Council this year, I raised the state's failure to criminalize marital rape as one of the contributing factors that normalizes violence against women. In June 2025, the government formally withdrew the domestic violence bill, which has been pending since 2017. And for the reason of the withdrawal was the extensive legislative alterations that undermined its core objectives. Here, I urge the Islamic Republic of Iran to redevelop comprehensive domestic violence legislation that effectively criminalizes violence against women, including marital rape, and ensures effective protection and remedies for victims. I think a couple of the delegations also mentioned the hijab. I think there has been positive developments here. The hijab law has not been enforced. That said, I want to emphasize that the wearing of the hijab remains mandatory under law. Note to Article 638 of the Penal Code punishes women who appear in public without the prescribed hijab to imprisonment of 10 days to 2 months or cash fines. So there is a discrepancy at the moment, and there may be some differences between the region, between the law and enforcement. And a few words now on the death penalty. And I think I'd like to thank all delegates that expressed concern and called for a moratorium on the death penalty. Over 1,200 known executions this year demonstrates the tragic scale of state-sanctioned lethal violence. It's a deliberate policy of fear and retribution that leaves behind devastated families and communities. As a criminal justice expert, I take the view that capital punishment reflects states' willingness to exert lethal control over its people rather than serving it as an effective deterrent. And there is pretty much academic consensus on the lack of deterrent effect of the death penalty. And to use an example from 2015, the state authorities have executed 12 people on espionage charges, with 10 executions carried out after the 13th of June. While these individuals were convicted before the military escalation, I think it's worth noting that the number of executions on the grounds of espionage are much higher than in previous years. 2025 isn't still over yet, but if we compare the numbers with previous years, 2013, we had known 6 espionage executions and 5 in 2024, so the numbers have more than doubled. Continuing on the death penalty, I'm particularly concerned about the number of executions for drug-related offenses, for which there are about half. I note that the narcotics bill has been introduced to the Majlis, and I will be monitoring this situation closely, and I stand ready to offer my expertise on capital drug laws, working constructively with the Islamic Republic of Iran towards reducing drug-related executions with a view to eventually leading to abolition. I also plan to examine drug policy and human rights in my upcoming Human Rights Council report, and I want to acknowledge the UNODC for their engagement with my mandate on this important topic. Moving on to the delegation's comment on concrete recommendations on transnational repression. The term transnational repression has been gaining traction, though transnational repression has existed for a long time before we started giving it its current name. And I welcome various states publishing joint statements in coming up with a shared definition and standing strongly against transnational repression. I urge states to take proactive action to protect individuals at risk within their own borders. Police in host countries face challenges as they must first build trust with victims who often distrust law enforcement based on their experiences back home. And police authorities also need training on how effectively to handle reports of transnational repression. I think my time is soon up, so I will finish this, my final remark. On a broader note, I want to urge states to stand united with the international community in upholding the integrity and independence of special procedures. I wish to unconditionally denounce the US government's sanctions on the Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories. Sanctioning a Special Rapporteur appointed by the Human Rights Council is a direct attack on the integrity of the UN human rights systems, including special procedures of which I am also a part of. Thank you very much.
I thank the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Islamic Republic of Iran.